Hello, everybody. Welcome to Self-Made Soul. We know there's a lot of things you could be doing on a Saturday. Some of you Saturday afternoon because you're way across the other side of the globe. Some of you Saturday mid-morning, but you chose to come here, which tells me you are interested in self-improvement. You're interested in ideas. You're interested in trying to integrate philosophy into your life. And that's pretty damn awesome. Also, Persephone, I want to thank you for your notes. I'm going to thoroughly abuse them this weekend and hopefully have a nice copy for you in a couple of days. So Michael's preference today, since Michael sort of guides these, he's the one who picks the topics, the articles, and the essays to read. I came from Ayn Rand's Voice of Reason, and it's the Psychology of Psychologizing. And at first I wondered, why in the fuck are we picking this? But then it seemed completely appropriate, Michael, for a lot of what we confront today. I'm talking about in our world where we debate people about ideas, the political world, where we have two tribes sort of irrationally going at each other, and in the personal world, I noticed where this kind of thing called psychologizing takes over for fact analysis, thinking, and reason. Um, it becomes a form of evasion, a form of evading introspection, a form of evading checking your premises, and sometimes a form of, especially in the political realm or in toxic relationships, a form of controlling other people by attributing causes to their behavior that they have no way of knowing for sure. Talk about psychologizing a little bit, what this means and why it's relevant to people like us who are trying to grow as rational human beings in the world.
So it's interesting that this show is the integration or what the cross section of philosophy and psychology. This article is about the proper separation of philosophy and psychology. So Rand defines psychologizing as consisting in condemning or excusing specific individuals on the grounds of their psychological problems, real or invented, in the absence of or contrary to factual evidence. Now, she specifically goes on to talk about the subconscious. So there's two ways, generally speaking, that this can manifest itself. One is to excuse somebody's bad behavior, could be yours, could be my own, on the grounds that I have bipolar disorder or I've got schizophrenia or I had a rough upbringing or I don't get along with my mother, whatever. There's my life has been such that my subconscious is not allowing me to act morally, so we excuse the behavior based on those grounds. The other way that Rand talks about it is in seeing somebody that's actually morally good but trying to condemn them based on their unconscious thought processes, their desires that they might have,
Their upbringing.
whatever. Yeah, whatever. The point is basically that in philosophy we are supposed to judge people based on their conscious convictions and their intentional conduct, not on what's going on in their subconscious or motivations that they might not even be aware of. And just, as a kind of an addendum to this I think is helpful for people. If you're in the change process, you are responsible morally for things that you can control. Nobody that I've ever met can volitionally control every thought and every emotion that happens to pop into their skull. So if I have, a thought of cheating on my girlfriend, for instance, the thought is not evil. It's what I do with it. Jesus in the Bible says if you lust in your heart, you've already sinned. You might as well commit adultery if you committed adultery in your heart. But that's pure bullshit because you cannot control what pops into your head, but you can control what you do.
Now, so that thought pops into your head, let's say that indicates that you have a desire to do something that could be potentially harmful to yourself. So what does that what should a person who is philosophically minded, meaning they want to apply philosophy to introspection and to healing themselves and to adopting new values, what should that thought or that feeling inspire in them?
Well, the first thing, you have that saying about if a house is on fire, you put out the fire. You don't run to figure out what caused it first, right? You put it out and then figure out what caused it. So in this case, if I've got to take action, excuse me, I got this cold still that the Zycam hasn't completely eradicated. So I have a cough drop. Now it's gone. But anyways,
Hmm.
if I've got to figure out what I'm supposed to do, let's say I am at a restaurant and the waiter forgets to bill me for a specific item. So, and I have a desire that says, you know what, man, screw this. These people are charging way too much anyway. It's not my mistake. Screw that. I'm just going to take the deal and leave. That's the thought that pops into my head. The first thing to do would be to assess what I should do there. What does my interest, what does my life require of me? What principles am I trying to live by? That's the first thing. Afterwards, I can analyze, why did I have that thought? Why did I have that motive? Why did I have that? And by figuring out why, I often can eradicate those thoughts from my subconscious or from my mind, whatever. But the immediate thing to do, and philosophically the most important, is to identify the moral thing to do, regardless of desires, regardless of motivations.
And the seeking of the origins of that feeling or that thought, that would be the part that's about psychology.
It would, yeah, and I would just go so far as to say it might not even be necessary to do that. It depends how much self-knowledge you want, how deep the problem is, how it's affecting you. The cognitive behavioral therapists, rational emotive behavioral therapists, they don't do that. They just focus on they,
What was
they
that?
just I don't know. They just focus on altering the thinking. But if you desire to know yourself, to truly grow to at deeper levels, it might be necessary to do that. But again, the most important thing morally, philosophically, is to identify the right thing to do and do it.
I like that. I like that. Now, every therapist I ever went to, it seemed like it was really about getting down to root causes and then exploring all of that ancient history and then having to experience a state of grief or rage that I had supposedly repressed. And it was through that expression that I was able to, or that cathartic expression, that I was able to finally come to terms with that past event. But none of that necessarily has to happen in order for you to change and become a better person. But I mean, people do have that in their head that they got to do a deep dive into their subconscious. They got to pull shit out with the spider webs attached to it and look at it in order to understand fully the nature of what's going on with them. But what they really need to know is, well, this is wrong. Here's why it's wrong, and I need to adjust my behavior.
Well, actually, the psychological program, as Rand points out, is actually to fix the health problem, the dysfunctioning consciousness, or the maladaptive subconscious. So you might actually want to do those things. Whether it's actually necessary is a different question altogether. But that's the entire point, is that it is the province of psychology to fix those types of problems, the thinking distortions, that sort of thing. It's the province of philosophy to tell you what you should do, what's right and what's wrong.
Right. And so people substitute those psychologizing for philosophy. And why do you think they do this? I mean, I
Well,
think
this is an
people
this
in
is
people
this
in
is
people in
actually
malignant
interesting, Mark.
people in malignant relationships can do this, I've noticed.
This is very interesting to me because the article Psychology on Psychologizing is about not delving into the motives of people and whatnot. I mean,
And
Rand
so
does
we're
qualify it with subconscious, but Rand does it in the article. She says, talks about the motives of people who do this.
yes.
Now, I suppose the argument can be made that she's identifying the conscious motives of people. But it's very difficult to know why somebody knows what they do. Even like, and she points out, a trained psychologist often has a difficult time knowing why a person does a specific thing. And this is complicated. Behavior is often multi-determined. It's not like it's, you know, uh, I stepped on a crack when I was a kid and my mother got hurt and now I have a superstition. There's often I stepped on the crack, I went to the beach, I'm throwing out ridiculous things, but the point is there's often a variety of factors that contribute to any given action. So to ascribe motivation can be a very tricky endeavor.
I know
And
she, but it seemed
I
to
love the
imply that,
cat.
yeah, he's a good guy. Um, it seemed to be though, uh, as much as the article is about, not ascribing these kinds of labels, she seemed to suggest that both were effectively evasive tactics. Did you get that from that article? That
Yeah, I mean,
psychologizing is evasive tactic.
yeah, it's ultimately trying to evade, in Rand's view, the task of moral judgment. And I definitely think that there is that there. I don't want to myself evade the the idea of evasion. Because suppose I'm an insecure person and I want to negate the idea of somebody being good. And then I come across a moral person. So I don't want to face the fact that this person's moral and I'm not. So what I do is I say, yeah, but he had good parents, he had good upbringing, his good fortune really isn't his responsibility. The gods, whatever, are on his side. Or on the flip side, I see somebody that's horrible and I don't want to say that person's horrible. So I say, well, that poor guy, he had a rough upbringing. He can't help it. He's got a distorted subconscious, whatever. Importantly, let me just say
In
that
both
mental.
in both cases, it seems that you're ascribing determinism to each case, so that the individual
Yes.
himself is not accountable.
Right. And I'm actually, people that have mental disorders, let's say, bipolar disorder, depression, whatever, there are factors in life that you cannot control. You still have control over some things. And the things over which a person has control are the things to be judged morally or immorally. Because ultimately, if I'm bipolar, it's my responsibility to get treatment, to take medications, to recognize when I'm going through these cycles, to understand my triggers, to understand the bad behaviors that I've engaged in as a result of this, to be on the lookout for them. You don't simply obliterate volition because somebody has, short of psychosis, some sort of mental problems or adverse thought processes.
Yeah, she did discuss that. Psychosis is a different matter, but somebody who's
Yes.
neurotic or has these other psychological states certainly have obstacles. They're not well. They have obstacles to proper cognitive functioning, but they're not impossible to overcome. I think that's an important thing to recognize, because I see a lot of people, especially actors, because that's who I mostly have to deal with, who think neurosis is actually a part of their talent, and they actually are afraid to fuck with the neurosis, and the neurosis becomes a major component of their lives. It directs everything they do. Even if you watch the work of a guy like Woody Allen, Woody Allen became famous, what? Writing about his neurosis. All of his characters are highly neurotic people, dysfunctional people on a lot of levels. He embraced that neurosis as an aspect of an unresolvable aspect of his art and of his personhood. I mean, what do you say to a person like that? Like an artist. Like, I remember one actress who was highly neurotic. She became a religious fanatic. She's now a religious fanatic and has been for decades upon decades, to the point where she would ignore her children and go into her prayer closet for 5 or 6 hours and have a relationship with this imaginary being over her existing, breathing, living children. She was becoming quite famous, but during class, she revealed, a very deep but strange, erratic emotional life. And I said, look, I think you need to go to therapy. I really think you should go to therapy. And she was afraid to, because Sanford Meisner, my ultimate mentor, had suggested, and so many artists at that time who grew up in the 20s and 30s uh, had suggested, that neurosis was the source of your art, and she thought she would become less emotional if she were neurotic. And I tried to explain to her, no, neurosis is a you're either overreactive or underreactive. You're not in tune with reality when you're neurotic, and you actually have to tune into reality, and that will make you a stronger valuer. It'll make your feelings much more clear. Even the therapies that I had enabled me to see more clearly what was going on inside of me and to introspect a little bit better. But she still refused to do that. I mean, what do you say to, I mean, did I already ask that question? What do you say to people like that?
Well, ultimately, let's take it at face value. Let's say actually that the neurosis that these people have is partly responsible for their creativity. So take Woody Allen, right? This guy's a very successful director. He's been around, before I was born, made a lot of good movies, made a lot of money. So he's faced with a decision, right? This neurosis helps me do these other things. So he's making a volitional choice to live with this neurosis. So now imagine somebody trying to excuse his bad behavior because he has that neurosis. Oh, yeah, but he's neurotic, but he's choosing to have it. He's making the judgment that this is in his interest to do. And I now am in a position to judge him for doing so. And it's important to note, Mark, that when we're passing moral judgment, the entire point isn't to wag our finger at somebody and tell them they're bad. The point is that in order to act in my own interest, I have to assess the character of the people with whom I deal. I have to know, can I trust them? Are they going to tell the truth? Are they going to show up on time? Are they going to lie to me? There's an abundance of things. The same thing would happen if I'm walking down the street and I see a vicious dog. I'm not going to judge it morally, but I'm certainly going to judge it as being dangerous to me, and I'm going to avoid it. The difference between the dog and the person is that the person has volitional control of their actions, and that's why it's called moral judgment. So if Woody Allen is such that he is neurotic and but he's still a genius and he's still doing good and it's only harming him, that's his moral issue to deal with. But I may still be able to safely deal with him, and that's all I really care about. So if it's a personal thing for him and it's not affecting his relationships, it's not affecting his work in a negative way, and he weighs that his life is better off, and maybe it is, okay, that's fine, but it's still his choice, and that's what we have to assess.
Interesting. Are there any questions? Did people in the gallery get a chance to read the essay? If so, I'd like to know your thoughts on them. Persephone said yes. There was a slight little nod there. So I think we need to bring Persephone out here
We
and
have a
get her
big
perspective.
floating thumbs up. I don't even know how that happened. That freaked me out.
I didn't see it.
A big thumbs up came up across my screen, floating.
Wow. Why didn't it come across my screen?
Maybe the thumbs up was just for me. I don't
That's what
know.
I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking.
Keep them
Um,
coming.
uh, Persephone, come on out here. Yes,
She
yes. Don't
doesn't
be
want
afraid.
to.
Don't be afraid. Have no fear. You're on mute, so we can't hear you.
You
No, you
cannot
don't have to be.
compel the people in the gallery to come on the show. What kind
The
of
power of Christ compels you. No, I'm trying to compel people to come out anyway. Just because I want to get the thumbs up was from Sandra, up on Sandra. The power of Lucifer does not work on me. Hmm, that's what you say now. But wait till it gets dark. So, uh, I do want to know other people's opinions on the article and if they got anything particular out of it, if it helped them
do you don't
to
see the chat on the screen right now? Now it's gone.
uh
You didn't see it?
I did see something. Why? Yeah, it's here.
Well, you
My
got to read
taking
that
one of
stuff.
them from the essay, a man's moral is formed by his philosophy, not his psychology, i.e., his physical health status or that of his mind in particular, which would be self-evident, shouldn't it be, given the definition of morality? I'm not quite sure.
Self-evident?
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
self-evident, no.
I don't think a lot of philosophical issues, particularly this, are self-evident. You can't point to it and say there, but you can, by
Yeah.
a chain of reasoning, get to that point. Um, uh, But do you think a man's moral framework is formed by his philosophy?
I do, but to say that a person's psychology doesn't impact their philosophy, I mean, it seems to me the two are connected. Obviously, the intersection of psychology and philosophy. I think the point is that a person, the element that's relevant in philosophy, a person's, for instance, person's moral views are should be shaped by philosophy. It doesn't mean that a person can't have their philosophy or their moral views in part impacted by their psychology. It's the responsibility of individuals to separate the two and focus on reality in order to form their moral views. But even that has a psychological component as it's a function of volitional consciousness, which consciousness is part of psychology.
I would even say that there's a lot of people who don't who form their more they don't even consciously form their moral concepts. They absorb them by osmosis through the culture, through their parenting. They don't question those premises over time. And so their quote unquote judgments, their moral judgments about life and the world, are I think the sources of those are completely mysterious to them because they do take them as self-evident. I remember B. Moni, who came on the show and attempted to justify her judgments of my actions and could not, because to her they were simply unquestionable, self-evident things that you just point to and say there they are, when they required a chain of reasoning. And I'm thinking now, Michael, of I just listened to Mark Ruffalo, who was saying some actually very interesting things. He was wearing an immigrant hat and he's talking about immigration and how immigrants are good and how they add to the country's wealth and to the intelligence generally of the country. They do great things for the country. They shouldn't be persecuted. All things that I agree with. But then he went ahead and said the real problem is the billionaires. And I thought to myself, here's a guy who has absorbed an ethics of some kind, is making moral decisions and moralizing out there in the world based on judgments that he hasn't really sussed out. He hasn't really thought about them too much, and so they're undifferentiated in a way. And so he doesn't understand that the people he's appealing to by saying that the billionaires are the bad guys as opposed to the political class that parasitizes people, eventually those people are going to say the millionaires are the bad guys because their sole orientation is equality. And so eventually, Mark, you are going to be on the banquet list. You're going to be on the buffet. You don't know it, but it was seeing those mixed premises so proudly emanating from this guy that made me think, wow, here's an actor who's supposed to be a passionate valuer, who should be thinking about values, culture, society, art in a deeper way than somebody else, the normal person has to. And yet he's not, because he's holding these conflicting values and doesn't even realize he's holding conflicting values that will harm him in the end. Because right now it's popular to say billionaires are bad.
Right. So let's use him as a case in point, right? So to argue that his psychological makeup has not impacted his philosophy, I think would be just mistaken. Whatever has happened to him, especially because there's no integration of philosophy. There's no volitional attempt to connect various areas to understand, to have a rational moral judgment. So he therefore just takes it in. And given that he's just absorbing some sort of morality from the, cultural ethos, it seems to me that his personal psychology has to impact which elements of that
Everything. Yeah.
morality that he takes in. Now, it's the task of philosophy to sort all that out and to figure out what's true, what's not, assess it by a rational standard. But even that, I would say, as I did before, has a psychological component, and that is the choice to think or not to think, to actually direct one's attention, to go through the logical processes. That to me seems that it has to be a psychological component, not in the sense of psychological determinism or a person's psychological problems or distortions in one's psychology, just in the sense that it takes place in the mind. So anything that takes place in the mind has to have a psychological component.
Yeah, and it seems to me a guy like Mark, as good an actor as he is sort of in a more or less perpetual state of drift. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
I do agree with it. I think that most people are in that state. I think that people like I'll use your nemesis Dave Smith as an example. Dave gets into debates and passes a nimity of moral judgments all around, right? And he takes something like it's wrong to murder, which he knows most people accept that. So then he extends it and says, look, there's people who didn't initiate the aggression in Gaza who are being killed. Therefore, that's murder. Therefore, that's wrong. But there's a whole chain of reasoning without even saying that he's wrong in his conclusion. The fact of the matter is, missing from his analysis is a standard of judgment. How do you judge what's moral, what's not? Then you have to say, well, okay, well, what is the proper political system? What is self defense? What does self defense entail? How much aggression in self defense? I don't know if it would be properly called aggression. What is the
No.
appropriate amount of force, I should say,
Right.
that can be used in self defense? What about retaliatory force? What does that consist of? How much of that is acceptable? What if the person whom you need to retaliate against is hiding amongst other people? What if that person is a future threat if you don't get him? Each of those things needs to be assessed morally against a standard. But all Dave does is come to the conclusion he says murder's wrong. And then he ascribes murder to this scenario and says, oh, look, this must be wrong. But you have to go through it. And by the way, the flip side is also true. Somebody that defends Israel blindly and just says these are God's people, they have a right to the land, they're making a similar error. Or if they just say, I don't care who dies on the other side, they were attacked first, they're neglecting the moral analysis as well. It has to be done in any situation if you're going to what's the word I'm looking for? Pronounce accurate moral judgment in a situation.
I agree. Both are equally embarrassing and I think dominant. It seems like in the discourse today, both sides evading what's really essential to the arguments. Well, is there anything else you want to say, Michael, about this particular essay? I know you have a hard out, and but
I have a
I feel
hard
like,
out in an hour, Mark.
but still, I feel like we unless we get some feedback from the audience, I feel
No, I
like
do actually have more to say. So
okay,
don't
good.
worry. Listen. I have a gift of running my mouth,
That's called that's
especially
called that's called Blarney.
what? I'm not Irish.
The gift of Blarney. You have the gift of Blarney, my friend.
All right,
Run
we
in
took
your
this
run
somewhere.
in your
Okay.
mouth. Go ahead.
Well, I tell you what, I've never kissed that stone,
I
nor
have,
would
and
I.
it ain't easy. I have, and it ain't easy. You should do
Well,
it. You should do it.
no, 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 no.
Don't be afraid.
Attaching my lips to spots where other men have placed their urine is not my jam. So
Urine is sterile, so you don't have to
I
worry
don't
about it.
care if it's sterile. That's an argument here. Drink
Just
this.
look,
It's
man.
sterile.
Do you know
Listen,
first of all, it's not it's a physical feat just to do it. I think if you can do it, it's a physical accomplishment. I
there's a
think
lot of things that would
Persephone
be a
I think
physical feat if
Persephone's
I
done
could
it because she's
accomplish.
shaking her she was nodding her head, so she knows you got to hang upside down and over like a 75-foot drop and kiss the stone, and it ain't easy. And the fact they used to do it without a safety bar there is unbelievable to me
I
because you'd
don't
have to
care
trust
how.
whoever was holding
Mark,
your feet.
Mark, there is
And
so
you have
many
to
things
bend
in this
backwards.
world.
You have to bend
Who
backwards to do it, so it's
cares?
crazy. Me,
There's a
because you're
lot of things that
frightened.
I'd have to bend backwards to
I'm
do that I'm not
psychologizing right
doing.
now. You're frightened.
No, I'm saying I'm not doing it because it's ridiculous. But in the article, Rand talks about how friends, under most circumstances, ought not to serve as impromptu therapists for their friends. And a part of me agrees that,
Mm.
psychoanalyzing your pals, in most cases, isn't a good idea. However, um, in prison, for instance, I'm in a cage. I have an abundance of psychological problems that need to be dealt with. I have a close friend who is also dealing with psychological problems. We're both reading a variety of books on the topic, and there's no effective mental health to turn to anywhere. So, he and I, in large part, acted as each other's therapists, and I think that it was perfectly appropriate and perfectly wise because it helped immensely. I don't think that Rand could account for that. And I also think that it's, like you said earlier, that you recommended somebody get therapy. And uh, I think that therapy can be a very good thing. I also think there's a lot of bad therapists and a lot of bad theoretical orientations that therapists use. So you have to be very careful when selecting a therapist. And if my problems aren't so deep that maybe I can actually deal with them by talking to a friend and telling him what's going on and getting some advice. And in those situations, I think it would probably be a very prudent thing to do.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I didn't like that passage, to be honest with you, because my friends and I talk frankly about our lives all the times with each other and bounce thoughts off of each other with respect to what a moment might mean, what an exchange between me and another person might mean. And I find their feedback very important because sometimes it's not that easy to introspect and see yourself. Sometimes another person can see you a lot better than you can see yourself. That's why we have a
Yeah.
director, for example, in acting, right? If you're watching yourself when you're acting, you're bad. Um, uh, and I just worked with a guy who's a pretty famous actor, but he was all on himself the whole time, and I'm just like, dude, get off of yourself. It's going to be so much easier. But you have a director for that. You don't have to worry about how you look or how you come off. Somebody's going to see it for you. And if you trust their perspective because they have a track record, you understand that they're very good at what they do, then you can relax even more. And certainly I have bounced lots of incidents off of very close friends of mine who know me and know the other person or people that I'm dealing with who can help me try to come to terms with what's actually happening. Because Michael, knowing objectively what's happening is not an easy thing when it comes to uh, complex human situations. So where do now I wanted to psychologize with Rand, and I wondered where that sort of closedness came from.
Well, so let's
It
put it
sounded
let's put it in
defensive.
context. Let's put it in context. So at this time, psychoanalysis was probably the main form of therapy. So when she's analogizing, that's probably what she's referencing. I don't know, but it seems at least highly possible, if not probable, that that is the case. It's also the case that she's specifically talking about the subconscious. And I think it can be very dangerous for amateurs to start telling somebody what their subconscious motivation is. For instance, there's a difference if I tell you, if I say, listen, Mark, I'm having a difficult time. I'm very scared. I have this speaking engagement and I'm intimidated. This is a new crowd I'm going to speak in. And you talk to me and say, well, Michael, you have to think in terms of what's the worst that can happen. You're good at speaking. If you just alter the way you view the situation, maybe you won't feel so nervous. Now, what if you were instead to tell me, well, Michael, the reason you have this fear of public speaking is because when you were a little kid, you accidentally walked into the girls' bathroom. They all screamed. It was very traumatizing. So now your subconscious is causing you to be afraid.
I don't think I've
That
ever had anybody give me that kind of, ridiculous analysis of a
Well, no,
situation.
no, you may not, but it seems that, but again, she's writing in the 60s when this stuff was kind of popular. So
Yeah.
it may be more so, but she does specifically say subconscious. It's not just about talking to your friends.
Yeah. So sometimes, like for me, something happens. It's rather complex.
That never happened to me, by the way. I never accidentally walked into the
Yeah,
girls'
yeah.
locker
You
room.
know, you did it on purpose, except you said you identified as a girl, so it was okay. Anyway, for me, it's about a situation happens. The relationship between me and the other person is complex. I haven't quite resolved where I stand with that person, where they stand with me. And so I will often go to somebody and say, look, this happened. And here's what I'm feeling about it. Now, I'm sure the other person, they're not here. They can't answer for their motivations for doing and saying what they did. But from my perspective, this seems to be the case. Do you think that that reflects a reality? Now, you could say that my self-doubt comes from, childhood experiences. If you could psychologize it, that's a fact. I've never had anyone say, "Well, Mark, you should trust your perceptions more. You shouldn't question things more." And that doubt comes from your childhood. None of that. They would either confirm or say, "Well, I don't know. I actually think maybe you're sort of slightly off here and being a little defensive, and here's why I think that." Um, but I think using friends as a mirror or reflecting tool is a fantastic thing. You need a sounding board sometimes, and if for lots of people who can't afford therapy, sometimes friends as a sounding board who know them, who don't psychologize, but simply give them a more objective perspective of the situation can help them, right? Like some people are
Yeah.
trapped in toxic relationships and they're psychologically bound up with the other person in such a way that they rationalize, they psychologize in order to evade the true cruelty of what they're going through with the other person. But a person on the outside who's a friend, knowing them, can say, I got to tell you, this person is objectively an asshole. They are being mean to you for no reason whatsoever. I mean, I've seen it, I've witnessed it. I've seen the way they speak to you or the way they treat you, and that sounding board can be a very important thing for somebody, and maybe important enough to make the other person loosen the entanglements a little bit.
I don't have any issue with what you just said, Mark. I think you're correct. I just think that it can go too far, and you have to be careful. That's all,
Mhm.
I think that's very important as well. You don't want to, for instance, like Manu said in the chat, there's a fine line between being a comfort and being a burden. And I think that there is the possibility, if you start delving into subconscious motives for something, of planting, because by definition, if it's subconscious, the person doesn't know. So if you suggest to them your subconscious fill in the blank, they might start to think that that is the actual reason when in fact it is not. And that could really complicate the person's mental well being.
So, Katrin says she was saying, I think it's to some extent it's good and healthy to talk to your friends and listen to each other's problems. I think though that there are some things you can't help your friends with, and it would probably be more healthy or helpful to recommend them to seek professional help. And she goes on to say, plus, for example, if you have a friend who is manic or psychotic and might put themselves or you in danger, it's a point to step back and tell them to see a therapist. I have personal experience with this because I have a friend who had a psychotic break during COVID. He
Ooh.
he's beginning in some ways to acknowledge that what he's going through makes him appear schizophrenic because he is actually schizophrenic. He has all of the symptoms of a schizophrenic. He's having auditory and visual hallucinations. He thinks me and other actors are talking to him on a social media platform that was inserted into him by an airborne viral thing from BioNTech. And he thinks that it once helps him collaborate with these great actors and artists. But on the other hand, they're also trying to fuck with his head and get him to play in this game where he gets into the psychologies of other people's heads. And he's constantly texting me. He's constantly testing other actors, celebrities, and stuff who he's been friends with over the years to try to get them to give him the numbers that he needs to contact, that the people at BioNTech to get him to stop the trespass against him because he wants to file suits, and he keeps quoting the UN charters on human rights and human trespass. And, for a while, I would just let him go on and on and on and on and on. And now I just say, you're having delusions. These are hallucinations and auditory hallucinations. You are schizophrenic. And he'd say, I'd say, your doctor told you so. He'd say, how do you know my fucking doctor told you so? I say, because you sent me an hour-long tape of your doctor and you, where the doctor kept trying to tell you you have schizophrenia, and you kept shifting the topic in another way to prove that he was part of a cabal of people against you. He's a parent. He's got paranoid aspects to him, and he's threatened all of us, not with physical harm, but with lawsuits because we're part of this cabal. But now I have just resorted to, you're hallucinating, you're delusional, you need medication, and you need hospitalization. And I found that literally after 3 texts, he'll stop talking to me for a while. And then I'll notice a subtle change in the things that he's saying and doing. This thing is making me seem psychotic. What's happening to me is I know I have the appearance of being schizophrenic, but I'm not. I feel like there's a budding sense of realization that's coming just by being completely honest with him and saying, dude, you need help. I can't help you. At the time you said I was communicating with you on this thing, I was at work acting on a set. I wasn't communicating with you. I was over here, somewhere else. And even he's tried to test his own premises. He's communicated with somebody in his mind who he thinks is going to meet him at a park. He'll go to the park and nobody shows up, and still he's not confirmed. He's told me he's seen my head come up over the horizon like the moon staring at him. I'm like, okay, that is psychotic. He feels his body expand and contract. This is all classic elements of real schizophrenia. And I've told him, look, my friend, the longer you go without treatment, I think the worse this condition is going to get and the more difficult it is going to be to treat. Now, it's been going on for 5 years, and all he keeps doing is trying to uh, confirm the psychosis as the truth, as opposed to, he's been 5150 probably 7 or 8 times. He's been in jail for 2 months at a pop. Nobody can force medication on him. Nobody can compel him to be institutionalized, which he frankly needs, because I am afraid at some point he's going to lose it and hurt somebody, because he thinks people are out to get him, and he thinks all of his friends have betrayed him and are a part of this cabal. And he's had restraining orders taken out against him from some actors, some big actors out there, whom he's gone over to their house unsolicited. And yeah, so like the long and the short of it is, Catherine's right. There are some people who are psychotic, who are not in touch with reality at all, for whom it is best for you to stay away from, and to say, look, you need therapy. I'm not qualified to help you. You need somebody who is qualified to help you, such as they are in today's day and age. And you need to also stay away from me, because I don't find you very healthy to be around. It's somebody else says, the comment, I don't remember which comment, Mike, has me wondering if Michael has ever had long, maybe even curly hair. I guess going into the girls' bathroom.
No,
Did you?
you saying I identified as a woman. The last time I had long hair, I was 13 years old. But it was not curly, no. The problem is, the reason I don't grow my hair out is two reasons. One, because I've got, where is it? Right here, a colic here. I've got a colic back here, so the hair just doesn't do what I want it to do. And plus, when I grow it long, I end up with dandruff, and there's nothing I can do to get rid of it, and I don't need that in my life.
Antifungals. Antifungals.
Oh my God. I've done all the dandruff shampoos. They did not work. And I am perfectly fine with the short hair. So I'm not going to grow my hair long just to try Mark's antifungal remedy.
Okay,
It's bad
people
enough you
sometimes,
gave me the Zycam. Like, we're going to not.
I guarantee you, it shortens your sickness. People sometimes try to make someone feel better about a situation by making excuses, giving them an out instead of letting them take personal responsibility for whatever didn't go well. It probably comes from a good place, but it's not necessarily helpful. I agree with that. What do you think? That's not helpful.
I don't have that problem. So like, I'm not the guy. I'll give you an example. Brent McCall and I used to run a group in prison. to correct criminal thinking errors, help people take responsibilities for their lives, and adopt proper values. And at the graduation, we everybody had to get, including us, into what we called the hot seat. So in the hot seat, you go around and you have various people give you feedback. So one guy was in the chair, and the first two people that saw him were, oh, giving him that stuff. So when he got to me, and I hope some people understand the reference here, I told them, okay, you've heard from Randy and Paula, and now you can come talk to Simon. So I'm not. I don't have the problem of trying to make people feel good by
I can tell
feeding
you a
them.
perfect. I can tell
Yes.
you. I was a witness to this. I could tell you a perfect time. So when we were interviewing a potential candidate for governor for the American Capitalist Party for California, and this person was a complete screwball. Now they were connected to us by an organization we have a coalition with called Deschedule Earth. So their primary mission in life is to deschedule marijuana, cannabis, so that it could contribute to the economic ecosystem out there and make people more prosperous. Whether they want to get high or use it for food or building material, yada, yada, yada. So this person was apparently quite an expert in that realm, but knew nothing about the Capitalist Party and sounded like a complete and total idiot. And within about 5 minutes, I was giving the person a chance because I wanted to see if they had actually read our platform and policies. But within about 5 minutes, Michael's like, no, no, thanks. Bye. And I was like, okay. Yeah. Vice chair says no. I'm on vice chair's side. I'll talk to you later.
Well,
But I was willing to hear her out a little bit just to see, but she turned out that she was thoroughly
I,
unprepared to
I
do
just
it
don't see
for the
it
party.
does nobody any good. To people think it does, but like when Melissa was still living, and she used to cook, and it was delicious, and then she made one meal I didn't like, and she said, "Do you like it?" And I said, "No." And she got upset. And okay, but now when I tell you that it's
It's
good. I
good.
like it. I don't like this. It doesn't even mean it's bad. It just means I don't like it. What ends up happening, and I know people, I'm not going to name names, but I know people that live this way. They never want to offend anybody. So they just
Mm,
tell people what they think that person wants to hear. But
mm,
what ends up happening now, if you say to the person, "Hey, do you want to go to a movie?" and the person says, "Well, I don't know because I got to be home at 9." Then if you say, "Well, okay, I'll have you home at 9," then somebody else says, "Oh, I don't think they really want to go." And there's no way to know who wants to do what because everybody lies to everybody trying to
yeah.
protect everybody. And I don't see how that helps any situation. You know what I mean? Like, just say what the hell you think, and then we can all act accordingly.
I think that's really good. Yeah, say what the hell you think, especially if you're asked. There was a time I went to a play, Michael. It was called Short Eyes, and my buddy was in it, who ended up committing suicide in 2026. It's a very vicious, violent play. You know what Short Eyes means. You're
Hold
familiar.
on, Mark, 1 second. It's not 2026 yet.
What he no, he killed himself in 2016. Sorry.
Okay, okay.
You know what Short Eyes means, right? It's a prison term for a pedophile. Oh, that's what it's supposed to be, a prison term for a pedophile.
I've
And so
never heard that.
that's interesting. So that's what the play was about. And afterwards, the whole cast sort of gathered around. I was part of that gathering, and one of the guys, and people were complimenting them all over the place, and I just stayed quiet. I just stayed quiet. And one of the cast members looked at me and he goes, "Yeah, man." He's like, "Thanks. I appreciate you." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Meh, I know what you think. I know what you think. You didn't like it." I'm like, "Nah, I really didn't." He's like, "Okay, cool." And I've been in that situation in another play where where these people were congratulating themselves. It was at the Knightsbridge Theater. They did Steel Magnolias, which to me is an actor-proof play. Actor-proof play means the writing is so fucking good, you have to be extraordinarily bad in order to fuck the play up. If you literally just say the words, the play is going to happen. All right. And these people were so bad they fucked the play up. And I think they were just all congratulating themselves afterwards. And then somebody asked me how I felt about it. I'm like, well, you took an actor proof play and you proved to me that there's no such thing as an actor proof play. I didn't make any friends that night, but I tell you, I hate it when actors are have no self perspective. Like they don't even have that an ounce of. They're so phony up on stage. They're phony outside of the stage, and it makes them phony in the stage, and they can't tell the difference between truth and phoniness anymore. And nobody's telling them that they're phony. Part of it is because people have different standards of acting, and they don't know really. I think they know it when they see it, but they're used to seeing, bad acting. And so that's what they sort of, take as acting. But it really frosts me when people don't have any perspective. Like, just say you suck, and you're going to be better off. If you say you suck and that performance was bad, you are going to be better off as a human being. Somebody says here, it's Persephone says, the thing that I thought about most while reading the article was how a lot of Gen Z, not just them, but it's most apparent with them, is how they use therapy speak to avoid accountability and discount other people. Just enough psychology knowledge to be dangerous. That's an interesting observation. Do you find that to be true, Michael?
I haven't got the slightest idea. I don't even know who Gen Z is, so I'd be the wrong guy to ask.
Manu is Gen Z.
It's not Manu.
I said Manu.
First you said Manu.
I said Manu. I'm
Okay.
sticking with it. I'm sticking with it. So that may be true. I mean, I wish Persephone would come on and actually articulate this verbally so that we can understand more of what she's. Here she comes. Go ahead.
Oh, here she comes.
Um, it's very windy, so if you hear like a squeaking in the background, it's my window. Um,
It's
there's
actually
this
a demonic entity trying to come into your house right now, which you said you're not afraid of, but don't worry.
I smudged before this, so I'll be fine.
Smudging is nothing.
Did
Smudging
you
is nothing.
really?
Go ahead.
No, no, I didn't. I have before, but no. So there's a trend with like a lot of Gen Z. You see it a lot, and you see it in younger people where they have just enough knowledge about psychology and to be dangerous. So instead of sitting and thinking about how things affect them, they'll say, "Oh, I'm triggered. Oh, he's a narcissist. I can't control myself because this is a trigger of mine." So it happens especially with younger people who are on the internet a lot and they're making videos of themselves. So you see it more with them where there's been so much discussion about psychological topics and psychology that they've absorbed just enough to be dangerous because
It
they
seems
don't.
it seems to me that that also comes from. I want to get Michael's perspective on this. It seems to me that that comes from an emotionalist orientation to everything, like taking emotions as tools of cognition and as automatic truths. And so these people think that once they have these feelings, they're absolute. They're unquestionable. Do you agree with that? It seems Persephone. Michael, do you think that's true as well? It's just
I
that
don't I don't
they
know.
don't go any deeper.
I've seen this a lot online, where people will say such and such is a narcissist, or that's a narcissist, or how to deal with a narcissist. But I've seen it in people my age and younger people, so I don't know that it's Gen Z limited. And to be honest, I don't really deal with an abundance of Gen Zers other than maybe online, and then I don't know how old they are usually, so I don't know. But I definitely think that people do that, especially with the word narcissist. That is so common now for people to call everybody that they don't agree with a narcissist. It's really
So
embarrassing.
the other thing that happens a lot is that they misunderstand the term, and this is something that you see a lot, where they misunderstand the term that they're setting a boundary. And there's this use of the term like, oh, I'm setting a boundary to try to control other people because you put the burden of your own feelings and your own life onto someone else. And then they say, oh, well, I'm setting a boundary. You're not allowed to X, Y, Z because if you do this, then you're stepping over my boundary. And they're using that like therapy term to control other people instead of what a boundary is. If you do this, I'm going to remove myself from the situation. So there's that
Correct.
as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I also think that because the culture is more emotionalistic and has decided that reason really isn't the standard that it wants to use to judge anything anymore. I think that in general, people have become more narcissistic as a result. If they take their feelings as absolutes, Michael, doesn't that like a Trump who takes his feelings and impulses as absolutes without questioning them? I'm psychologizing now to diagnose him as a narcissist, but I really think that's the case. A guy who does
Yeah.
not introspect, who projects his emotions onto the world, who has a primacy of consciousness attitude, so that his feelings are they don't reflect reality, they are reality. A guy like that, to me, is a narcissist, and I find a larger and larger number of young people falling into that category.
I think that there are obviously a lot of people who take their thoughts as given. What they think, they assume is correct. They don't challenge their thoughts, they don't challenge their interpretations. They just run with them. But in line with what you said, I read a book called oh God,
The
the
Age of
I
Envy.
th- and
Oh,
I've read that. No, this I think it's called something about dialectical behavior therapy, and it's something that is used primarily with people with borderline personality disorder. And the argument that the person made is oftentimes people say that borderline personality people with that diagnosis are manipulative. But what it really is the people saying that are talking about how these people make them feel. They feel
huh.
as if they're being manipulated, so they ascribe manipulation to the other person. Now, I don't know the accuracy of that. I'm not, I haven't done a deep dive into borderline personality disorder, but I think that's what you're talking about. So if somebody's arguing with someone and then they get this feeling that that person's behaving narcissistically, then they say, "Oh, this person's a narcissist." Or somebody says this person, this has happened to me a lot of times in my life, where somebody says you're treating me like what's the word I'm looking for, you're acting as if I don't my opinions don't matter. And I would tell them that's your interpretation of what I'm saying, right? That's not what's in my head. You cannot take your feelings and then ascribe, because you feel a certain way, ascribe a motivation to me, right? It might very well be the case, but the fact that you feel a certain way is no evidence that I've done anything.
Right. Right.
It's just how
And
you feel. It's
some
just, let me wind up with Eleanor Roosevelt had a saying that nobody can make you feel inferior without your consent. And I think that that is apt in this set of circumstances.
I think so too. Yeah, sometimes people they pull that one because you disagree with them, and because your arguments are actually stronger than theirs, and they say you're just not taking my argument seriously. You're just not taking me seriously. Well, I am. I'm taking you seriously by the fact that I'm actually sitting here discussing it with you because I think it's worth it. But the fact that I disagree with you doesn't mean I don't take you seriously. It, you know, um, that seems like it. That does seem like to be honest with you, a tool of manipulation on the part of the person using it. They're trying to win. They're trying to win by not actually presenting arguments, but by denigrating you as a human being.
Yeah. My mother used to have this thing where she would argue with me and we're arguing. And then she would say to me, "Oh, see, you just think you're always right." And hold on a second here. You're arguing with me too. Do you think you're wrong and are arguing anyway? No,
Yeah, I
you're
love that one.
arguing because you think you're right. Of course, if I'm arguing, I think I'm right. Otherwise, I wouldn't be arguing, right? Now,
Right.
if you ask me separately from given arguments and say to me, "Mike, are you ever wrong in the arguments you make?" I would say, "Of course, I'm not infallible." But in the moment, if I'm making an argument, I obviously believe it. Otherwise, I'm a liar. Would you rather that?
Yeah, and what's so funny is they think the same thing. They think their perspective is right too. That's
Yeah.
why they continue to argue. Neither
Yes.
neither has persuaded the other of the rightness of their perspective. I hate it when people do that. Katie says, mine and my neighbor's apartments just had to deal with water damage because of this kind of thing. The lady set fire to her apartment. She's very schizophrenic, and her daughter uses that as an excuse, then blames the system for not helping her mother, only wanting to put her in jail. What do you think about, Michael, when I look at my friend who has schizophrenia and cannot nobody seems to be able to do anything about it, right? Like he can't be involuntarily committed. He's out of control of his consciousness for sure. He's unpredictable and potentially a threat. I think he might be living with his brother right now in Ventura, but his mother's scared of him. Nobody can commit this guy. He gets 5150. He can only stay in there for 72 hours and then he's out back on the streets again, often living on the streets and or with whomever will take him in, who's not afraid enough to take him in. What do you think about involuntary commitment? And now involuntary has to voluntary and voluntary has to presume the capacity for choice, and I don't know that a guy like this actually has the capacity to choose what's in his best interest, and he needs somebody as a he needs somebody as his guardian to do that for him, because I mean he's going downhill fast physically and in every respect. He just looks like a completely different person because he's being enabled more or less to continue to be sick.
Okay.
So what do you think about the concept of commitment? I know that's going off
No,
off
it's
top.
fine. I just let's understand that this world consists of more than this one guy, right? So this is not something to be taken in isolation. So now let me say that I don't think that therapists are good enough to assess that somebody's dangerous in the future, unless that person is committing crimes or using violence. I don't think that therapists are equipped to predict the future. So that's the first thing. Secondly, we have due process requirements and law, innocent to be until proven guilty for a reason. If we allow for therapists and family members to decide that somebody's dangerous outside of that person actually breaking a law, you're creating and it's already created, but a very problematic precedent. And you end up with people being committed who aren't dangerous. It's inevitable that that's going to happen. And I just, I don't think that that's worth it. I don't think that it's just to lock somebody up because you think that they're dangerous. I understand that.
They do have psychiatric courts, and they do have courts where
You,
they
what you,
attempt to evaluate this stuff. And he has spent multiple months in jail for committing some form of crimes. I don't know if they're violent
well,
crimes.
then when he commits a violent crime, he should be sentenced accordingly. But outside of that, and saying, well, there's psychological courts where who's going to testify? His family members, a psychologist who
Well,
may or may not
he's going to be
know.
evaluated by psychiatrists. Yeah.
Of course. And I don't trust psychologists and family members and judges to make these decisions to lock somebody up. When you're talking about taking somebody's freedom from them, that's a serious, serious thing. You're not talking about having this guy, his parents a victim, and he goes and lives somewhere else. You're talking about locking somebody up, restraining their freedom, and probably forcing them to take medication that the person may not want to take. That's serious business. And the potential for harm is, in my mind, way, way too great to be doing that. If we take the idea of freedom, of individual rights, of innocent until proven guilty seriously, then we ought to take them seriously and not just go locking people up because we think they're abnormal in some way. It just
And of
doesn't.
course, we have the other perverse version of that, where mentally ill people are being let off after committing violent crimes and going out and finally committing the
I,
ultimate
I,
murder.
yeah, no, I agree. If a person, if you have a person committing crimes, then that person needs to be held accountable for committing the crimes.
So unless someone commits a crime, this is Catherine saying his rights should not be taken away. But rights are also predicated on rationality. And if somebody's irrational, that somebody needs to be rational in their life. They need to be the person that is able to handle the rational choices for that person's life, just like a child, except in this case, it's an
But
adult who has no control over his rational faculty.
do you see what you just did?
Uh, yes, I do see what I just did. I see that a person of diminished capacity needs somebody
What you're saying,
to look
what
out
you,
for them.
yes, what you are saying is that some people are in a position to so assess the rationality of another person that they can deprive him of his freedom. And what I'm saying
Yes.
is, I do not trust people to make those determinations.
Okay.
It's far too dangerous of a power to grant. To say, well, this guy's not violent yet, but he may be in the future. No way, man.
Okay, but the people who have been violent and been let off multiple times and
But that's,
committed
but now, yeah,
violence against
well,
other people
yeah,
until they
well, we're,
finally murder somebody, like the guy who
no,
murdered that poor woman in what was it, Portland, Oregon? He'd
yeah. Then the
assaulted
problem
many,
is,
many.
the problem is letting this guy off after numerous assaults.
Mhm.
The problem isn't that we don't have precogs. The problem is that we have a soft justice system that where you have a guy, a repeat offender, being
Agreed.
let out. That's the problem. That's what we
Agreed.
should be addressing. We
But
don't
if,
then
even
give.
even if the person isn't, say, a danger, the fact that they have no control over their rational faculty, the fact that they are threatening people,
Hold
um,
on. If they're
not only
threatening
with legal,
people, if they're
yes,
threatening people with physical
my
violence,
friend threatens people
with physical violence,
with lawsuits and violence.
lawsuits, he can threaten all he wants. Physical violence is a different story, but that then you're not talking about a mental health commitment. You're talking about prosecution for the crime of threatening.
Yeah, but he would have to be institutionalized in the mental hospital. He couldn't be in a jail. That there wouldn't be the proper facilities for a person like him, even if he's
Within
violent.
jails, they have mental health units that he could go to.
Yeah, because he needs,
That's
frankly,
fine.
medication,
But if you're
which he won't
saying
take.
if you're saying that in the case of somebody who it's a bit interesting to me because if somebody is so out of control that you're describing, then either that person can take care of themselves in some way or they can't. If they cannot, and if nobody is willing to take care of them, i.e., family, friends, whatever, it seems this person would be committing crimes of some sort, in which case you could incarcerate them. If they're not doing that, then what is the evidence that they one day will do it? And how does that then justify precogs, which is what we're talking about? Somebody assessing a person's future behavior.
Well, as they've said with people who have committed these terrible crimes, school shootings and stuff, they've left manifestos and or have a long trail of social media interactions and fantasies of violence that were rather well known before the person actually committed the crimes. Are you saying that with that kind of trail, a person can't make
Is there a threat taking
the
place? If the person is threatening violence and there's a reasonable possibility
when
that these
somebody
threats are
has
real.
violent ideations online and
Yeah,
is
here's the
perusing
problem,
violence,
Mark.
and then
The
this
problem
hold on,
is,
but then this comes to fruition in a crime where they kill,
sure.
50 people in a mass
And what I
shooting.
would say is, how many people are out there that do that that don't end up killing somebody? Is it a one to one where every time we have something or that somebody
I
does
don't know.
this?
I don't know what that figure would
And
be.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it's not. Post hoc, it's very easy to go back and say, look, all the signs were there. But anti hoc, before the crime took place, could it be predicted? How many people are out there? I remember I was in Elmcrest Hospital one time and I joked and said I'd like to blow this place up, and I was restrained and locked up. I had no intention of blowing the place up. I never would have blown the place up. I've heard people make threats all the time. People write all kinds of wacky things. You simply, unless they
That's true, but
are,
when you're in a hospital like that, you make those kinds of threats, then people have to take you at your word, my friend. If
they,
you're
you take a
I
15-year-old kid without access to explosives at his word. that he's going to
Well,
blow
you
the
didn't
place up?
give me the entire context. You just said you
No,
were.
I didn't need to. My only point is that
I
I
would
did
take
not.
you serious. I would take you at your
That's
word.
fine.
If you
But
threatened me, I
but
would have to take you at your word,
first of
not knowing
all,
anything about you.
first of all, I made an actual threat. If kids are online making actual threats, they can
Hmm.
be dealt with accordingly. If they're showing some kind of infatuation with violence, what do you? It's just that you cannot function that way. People simply do not have the ability to predict the future in that way, to take somebody's liberty away when that person has not committed a crime, when that person has not violated anybody's rights. Simply saying online, I
I
like
don't
death, I
disagree.
like blood, that's a
No, I
different
don't
story.
disagree. I don't disagree. What about, here's what Katie says. What about when the person does commit the crime, which affects the safety of other people? Should they be institutionalized instead of just doing their time and being let back out? Well, I mean, Michael knows more about the system than I do. He says there's mental health facilities in jails where
There's
they would
mental
get
health blocks,
treatment.
and the mental health blocks suck. I don't deny that, and nor do am I suggesting that there's some kind of a perfect solution to any of this. My only point is that I would much rather have a situation where you have somebody that is mentally ill who has to do time for committing violent offenses than I am with incarcerating somebody who hasn't committed any crime.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Catherine says they can get mental health treatment in jail. Mental health is not an excuse for committing crimes, but just having a mental health issue is not an excuse to lock them up. I never suggested that. I never.
Well, she's actually correct about that. By the way, a psychiatrist once told me, I was having a conversation with him, um, in prison, and he said even the case of a schizophrenic. He said, let's take the case of a schizophrenic who believes that the neighbors are aliens coming to take over the planet. That person still has other options than just going and murdering the family across the street, right? Call the police, run, move, whatever.
As
And I
my
get
friend
what,
demonstrates, as my friend demonstrates by trying to call the UN, trying to call George Clooney's wife, trying to enlist the
right.
help of friends. Yeah,
Yes.
everything but the violent option. He's still, even though he's still in the throes of his
Yeah.
delusion. But does
Yeah.
that? But still, can that capacity? I mean, we're psychologizing here, and I don't, neither of us are really qualified to do this. But can that person have such a diminished capacity that they don't see any other alternative but violence?
Is it possible? Sure. Am I
Yeah.
willing to trust psychiatrists and judges ahead of time to make that assessment? No. Thomas Saz testified. They once asked him to testify in a case to assess somebody's competence, and the thing was is he was supposed to assess the person's sanity when they committed the crime, right? So Thomas Saz refused to see the person, the person he was supposed to evaluate. So the defense, I guess, if I'm remembering correctly, thinks, okay, well, this guy didn't even see him. And he said, no, I don't need to see them because the best I could do is diagnose the person's sanity now. There's no way I can go back in time and assess the person's sanity at the time of the offense. Nobody can. All we know is that the person committed a murder and needs to be tried for it. There's no way to understand the person's thought processes at that time. And
Mm.
there's to me there's just no way around these things logically. Um and I just freedom is something that's precious, and locking somebody up is very, very, very serious.
Mm. Indeed, it.
Catherine Cassio says that she loves Saz. I've twice interviewed a good friend of his, Jeffrey Shaler, on my show about these issues.
I'm not familiar with Saz, so I'm glad Catherine is familiar. So, Michael, we're sort of coming up on your, I think, hard out if we're not
Yes.
careful here. So,
12
if
minutes.
are there any other questions respecting the essay, or any other questions respecting any of the other comments that have come up through the conversation? Please either raise your hand and or write them in the chat so we can address them. I think it was a very interesting conversation. I hope you guys got something out of it. I know I certainly did. And I can't wait to hear what the next essay is going to be for next weekend. I'm sure it's going to be a humdinger. Any questions, folks, from the gallery? I can only see a limited number of people in the gallery.
Oh my Lord. You drag your arrow up to the top and you're going to see a blue arrow. When you do that, you hit the arrow and you can see everybody else.
Don't be giving me the look at the boomer trying to play with the technology thing, Persephone. I see the look. I see the look. I see it. I'm pressing something.
You don't just press some random something. There's
there
a
we go.
arrow. There's a
There,
a
no, now there
blue
is no. I had to do a whole thing, but now I'm seeing everybody. There we go. Look at everybody. Catherine, I hope you're feeling better. I know you had surgery recently. Hope you're doing okay. Uh, um, and there's Katrin. I thought you were traveling, Katrin, but thanks for visiting. Manu's there. There's Manu shaking her head. Always shaking her head. Katie. There's Katie, Lou. I'm seeing everybody. Persephone. Yeah, nice to see everybody here. Some folks have refused to show their faces for some reason. They must be wanted by the FBI. They must be afraid of involuntary incarceration, which is what we were talking about, Michael.
Yes.
Right.
Katrin has her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say about telling people the truth. I had that experience at work last week because, as you both know, I have some not really competent coworkers. So until a certain point, I always told them, it's gonna be okay, you will learn that. And about 2 weeks ago, I stopped that and just let them fall through their mistakes because I thought learning through pain would be more effective by now. And they really got upset. I don't care about it, but not everyone can take the truth when you tell them, well, you fucked up, you have to fix your mistake by your own. So, yeah, it's certainly the case that some people rather want to be sugar-coated instead of hearing the truth.
Yes. Thank God I gave up sugar. Yeah, it's best to hear the truth, even if the truth hurts. The truth really will set you free. It'll make you a better person. You may not want to hear what you're going to hear, but if it's true, it's constructive. Especially if it's said in a constructive way. I mean, sometimes delivery matters, Michael. You know, you got to admit. Sometimes you got to, if you want to be constructive,
You don't have to go around being a dick, but you
Yeah,
can
you
be
don't be-
honest.
Yeah, but you be honest. Don't be a dick. Don't use honesty as a means of, exercising your own demons on other people, which is,
Right.
believe it or not, there's lots of acting teachers who do stuff like that. They're terribly abusive in the name of honesty. No, you can be honest and constructive. You can build people up who you want to build up through never lying about what you think and feel with respect to that person. And that includes the very awkward thing of like when Michael's girlfriend said, "How did you like it?" He said, "I didn't." Tracy does that to me. I cook. She's like, she says she doesn't like something or she does like something. I know when she says she likes something, she really likes it. And I know that when she doesn't, she doesn't. And she knows when she puts something on and says, "How do I look?" And I say, nah, not a fan. She knows that when she puts something on and I say, "Yes, that's it. That's the ticket," that it's true. And that's the kinds of relationships you want anyway, right? Because then you can trust what that person says. All right, folks. I think it's probably time for us to get going. Next week, we will be here at the same time with another topic that I hope enriches you and brings value to your life, helps integrate philosophy into your own life, and makes you a clearer, better thinker, and makes you more accessible to yourself, makes your gifts more accessible to yourself, and helps you realize your potential. All right, folks. So until next week, we'll see you. Peace.